Imagine this. You've just returned home, tired, your mind buzzing with everything you've done today. You handled the chaos of work, the weight of errands, the unending tide of obligations no one sees. Your hands are sore, your heart is heavier, and then he says it again. You know, Sarah's wife just got promoted. She still comes home and cooks dinner. Why can't you be more like her? He doesn't say it in a cruel voice. In fact, it's calm, almost passive, like he's offering a helpful observation. But it pierces through your skin like glass. The words settle like ash inside you. And just like every other time, you try not to react. You tell yourself it's not worth the argument. You swallow it. Again. Pretend it doesn't bother you. Pretend you didn't just feel your worth drop another inch in his eyes, but something shifting. Not outside you, but within. There's a scream behind your silence now. A quiet rebellion building breath by breath. Because here's the paradox. He chose you. Loved you once for who you are. And now, every time you grow, strive, survive, he compares you to women who aren't you. Women you've never met. Women you didn't sign up to compete with. Women whose lives, struggles, and choices are invisible, and yet, somehow you're expected to mirror them. What's worse, he doesn't just compare. He contrasts. Their successes become your failures. Their support becomes your shortcomings. Their obedience becomes your rebellion. And so you begin to wonder, when did love become a scoreboard? When did his admiration begin requiring an opponent? When did your existence stop being enough? You see, the damage isn't in the words alone. It's in the subtle, persistent erosion of your identity. Like waves on a cliffside, his comparisons wear you down. Quietly, slowly, masterfully. And here's where it gets darker. You begin to question yourself. Am I not working hard enough? Maybe I should be more like them. Maybe I'm the problem. You internalize his lens. You shrink yourself to fit his fantasy of the better woman. You bend your boundaries. You silence your truth. All to avoid being compared again. But have you ever stopped to ask, why is he comparing you in the first place? Why does he need to summon imaginary women? Why? Does he need the ghost of other wives to haunt your relationship? It's not love. It's not guidance. And it's certainly not partnership. It's something far more insidious. It's control dressed up as disappointment. It's dominance disguised as advice. It's the psychological seed of inadequacy, planted by someone who knows, consciously or not, that if you ever felt fully worthy, fully whole, you might leave. That's the secret no one says out loud. Sometimes comparison isn't about admiration, it's about control. Because if you're always chasing someone else's ideal, you'll never arrive at your own. Now pause, take a breath, and ask yourself this. How many times have you been measured against someone who was never in the room? How many times have you had to carry invisible rivals, each more perfect than you, each more useful to him, each more compliant? He doesn't just compare, he weaponizes admiration. And every time you stay silent, every time you rationalize it, a little piece of you goes missing. But what if you've been asking the wrong question all along? What if it's not, why is he comparing me? But rather, why do I keep letting him? Because the moment you stop accepting the premise, the moment you stop playing the game, you start to see clearly. No healthy love thrives on constant comparison. No man who truly values you will ever need to shrink you with someone else's shadow. You weren't born to be anyone else's version of success. You weren't made to become another woman just to soothe a man's ego. And most dangerously of all, if you continue down this road, you risk becoming a stranger to yourself. So the real question, the one no one wants to ask is, When did you decide his fantasy was more important than your reality? When did you learn to abandon yourself just to be chosen? Because that's the tragedy in this story. Not that he compares, but that you've been trying to win. You can't win a race that isn't real. You can't win love by losing yourself. And maybe, just maybe, the deeper question isn't about him at all. Maybe it's about you. Why are you still trying to earn what should have been given freely? What would it take to finally walk away from someone who only sees your worth through the lens of someone else's life? What would it mean to choose yourself, even if it means losing him? The answer isn't simple, but it's necessary. And before we can unravel what's truly going on beneath the surface, behind the words, we have to ask one final thing. If this comparison game never ends, what exactly are you still playing for? You think it's about you. You think if you just work harder, love better, complain less, achieve more, he'll finally stop comparing, that he'll finally see you. But here's the brutal truth. It was never about you. It was always about him. And what's hiding under his comparisons is something far more ancient and corrosive, something older than your relationship, deeper than your arguments, something woven into the very foundation of how we've been taught to view women, worth and love. Comparison is not merely a habit, it's a psychological survival mechanism, one born from insecurity, from fear, from a failure of self. Carl Jung once said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." But what happens when that understanding never comes? When irritation turns into projection? He doesn't admire these other women. He needs them. Because in the mirror of their perfection, he gets to avoid facing his own inadequacy. He weaponizes their image so he doesn't have to confront his own failure to grow, to evolve, to participate as an equal. And by holding them up as examples, he keeps you running toward an ideal you were never supposed to reach. It's a psychological trap, a treadmill built in hell. Psychologist Abraham Maslow argued that human beings are driven by a hierarchy of needs: safety, belonging, esteem, self-actualization. When a man feels powerless in his own life, when he hasn't climbed that ladder himself, he may try to steal a sense of power by lowering the woman beside him. He can't climb, so he drags. Now here's where it gets darker. Society taught him that women are extensions of men, that your worth is measured not by your own inner life, but by how useful, beautiful, submissive, or supportive you are in his story. And if you deviate from that script, even slightly, he feels threatened. Philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche warned of this. He who cannot obey himself will be commanded. But what he didn't add is this: some men deal with that inner chaos by commanding others, by reshaping women into obedience, not with rage, but with rhetoric, not with fists, but with comparisons. It's a quieter violence, and it has its roots in existential fear. Jean-Paul Sartre argued that hell is other people, but what he meant was this: when we see ourselves through the gaze of another, we lose agency. We become objects. That's what he's doing to you. He's not seeing you as a full human being with flaws, triumphs, and mysteries of your own. He's reducing you to an idea, a comparison, a project, and worse, you've begun to do the same. You've internalized his gaze, measured your worth by his satisfaction, judged your effort by his mood. But you are not a mirror for his unresolved pain. You are not a background character in his story of self. Now think of this through the lens of Viktor Frankl, the Holocaust survivor and psychiatrist who wrote Man's Search for Meaning. He said, "When we are no longer able to change a situation, We are challenged to change ourselves. But here's the twist. You can change the situation. You just don't think you deserve to. You think leaving would mean failure. That not being enough to stop the comparisons is a personal flaw. But let's go even deeper. Arthur Schopenhauer believed human desire was a form of suffering, that we are driven by lack, and that lack never ends. Now imagine a man who is ruled by that void. But instead of confronting it, he masks it by idealizing women who aren't you. It's not love. It's longing without reflection, desire without intimacy. He can't love you because he doesn't know how to love himself. And here's where your suffering begins. You're not just fighting for approval. You're fighting for your own identity inside a space that keeps erasing it. You've become both the victim and the enabler of a game you never agreed to play. You're told to be strong but not too strong, independent but not too distant, beautiful but effortlessly so, submissive but intelligent, empathetic but not emotional, supportive but selfless. You were taught to split yourself into fragments and then be blamed for not feeling whole. And when you finally begin to question this system, the system turns on you. You're too sensitive, too emotional, too feminist, too much. That's not love. That's cultural programming, psychological suppression, philosophical gaslighting. But let's call it what it truly is. It's an inherited pathology, a sickness passed down through generations of men who were never taught to feel. A sickness passed down through generations of women who were taught to be grateful just to be chosen. He compares you because he is lost. He compares you because he is afraid. He compares you because if he ever stopped, if he ever truly looked at you, really saw you for who you are, it would force him to confront all the ways he's failed to show up for love. But it's not your job to carry that burden. You are not a teacher for the emotionally immature. You are not a therapist for a man who refuses to heal. You are not a martyr for a system that thrives on your exhaustion. And yet, you stay. Why? Because you've been taught to confuse being loved with being useful, to confuse acceptance with adjustment, to confuse peace with submission. So you endure. But there's a cost no one talks about. And that's what we'll uncover next. Because when you allow comparison to shape your self-worth, when you remain in a relationship where love is conditional upon mimicry, something begins to rot beneath the surface. Not just in your relationship, but in your soul. And once you see what's truly at stake, you'll never unsee it. You think it's only hurting your feelings. You tell yourself it's just a comment here, a jab there, something to brush off, something not worth the fight. But beneath the surface, the damage is meticulous, surgical, silent, like a vine wrapping itself around your throat, gently, patiently, until the breath you once called your own is no longer yours. Because this isn't just about what he says. It's about what you start believing. At first, you resist. You tell yourself, I know who I am. I'm strong. I've worked hard. I've built my life. But the human mind is fragile, especially when love is involved. And slowly, over time, your certainty begins to blur. It starts with small doubts. Maybe I really don't do enough. Maybe I should be more like those other women. Maybe I'm the one failing him. That maybe is a poison disguised as self-reflection. And once it settles in, it changes everything. You stop dreaming. You stop demanding. You stop desiring. Because how can you want more when you're busy trying to become enough? This is the first great consequence of comparison. The erosion of identity. Who were you before his voice filled your mind? Before your worth became dependent on invisible standards? Before every action you took had to be weighed against someone else's? Cognitive psychologists call this learned helplessness. When someone repeatedly faces devaluation or failure, they begin to believe they have no control over their outcomes. Even when the situation is toxic, they adapt, not by improving, but by giving up. And that's exactly what comparison does. It traps you in a mental cage, where no matter how hard you try, you're never enough, because the ideal you're chasing isn't even real. And yet you keep running. That leads us to the second consequence: exhaustion of the soul. This isn't regular fatigue. This isn't just being tired. This is the kind of exhaustion that lives in your bones, the kind that no amount of sleep can heal. Because you are not just physically drained, you are emotionally unseen. You could be bleeding, and he'd still point at another woman's smile and say, "Look how graceful she is." You could be surviving a storm, and he'd still say, "You know, some women never complain." You become a ghost in your own life, haunting a house where you cook, clean, contribute, and care, but are never celebrated, never cherished. This kind of emotional starvation is slow but fatal, and society won't see it. Because on the outside you still function. You go to work, you take care of things, you show up, but inside, something sacred is dying. And here's where the third consequence creeps in. You lose trust, not just in him, but in yourself. You stop trusting your feelings. You question your instincts. You wonder if you're too sensitive, too dramatic, too selfish for wanting more. He doesn't need to gaslight you anymore. You've started to do it for him. That's the final trick of long-term comparison. It turns your mind against itself. You begin to think, maybe love is supposed to feel like this. But it's not. Love isn't a mirror held up to someone else. Love is not a scoreboard. Love is not earned by becoming someone else's idea of perfection. And still, you stay. Because this is the fourth and most dangerous consequence: emotional addiction. Neurologically, your brain is being conditioned. Every time he praises another woman, criticizes you, or withdraws affection, you experience an emotional drop, like withdrawal. And when he occasionally shows kindness again, your brain releases dopamine, a chemical hit of reward. This cycle of rejection and reward is what psychologists call intermittent reinforcement. It's the same mechanism used in gambling addiction. You stay, not because you're fulfilled, but because you're hoping the next pull of the lever will finally give you love. It's not love, it's manipulation coded in uncertainty. And the longer you stay, the harder it becomes to leave. Because leaving would require a kind of emotional sobriety. It would mean detoxing from the need to prove your worth. It would mean admitting that his version of love was never actually love at all. But perhaps the most tragic consequence of all is this: the world never gets to meet the woman you were meant to be. Because the woman who doubts herself doesn't start the business. The woman who feels not good enough doesn't write the book. The woman who spends her life trying to be someone else's ideal doesn't have the energy to discover her own. And that right there, that's the real loss. Not just to you, but to all of us. Every time a woman is compared into silence, the world becomes dimmer. Every time she shrinks to fit a man's expectations, a future dies before it can be born. And every time she believes she is not enough, another generation learns to do the same. You're not just fighting for your own freedom. You're fighting for the right to exist without apology, to live without permission, to be loved without comparison. But it starts with seeing the truth, that this isn't about becoming better. It's about remembering who you were before someone made you forget. And that remembering, that reclaiming, is the first real act of freedom. So now we stand on the edge, because something is about to change. You've seen the pattern. You've felt the pain. You've tasted the silence that follows every comparison. And now there is only one question left to ask. Are you ready to walk into the fire of your own truth, even if it means burning the fantasy he created? Because only through fire is the soul forged, and only by choosing yourself will you finally be free. You've walked through the shadow. You've faced the weight of comparison, the theft of your voice, the slow dismantling of your spirit. And now, at the edge of all that has been taken, all that was lost, you stand before a terrifying, beautiful truth. You were never supposed to be loved conditionally, not pieced apart, not graded, not measured against ghosts. You were never supposed to earn your place in someone's heart like a worker climbing a ladder to nowhere. The final unshakable realization is this: love that must be proven is not love. Love that demands your erasure is not devotion. Love that only exists in comparison to others is not a bond. It is a cage. And if he could only see your worth by looking over your shoulder at women who are not you, then he never truly saw you at all. He saw an outline, a placeholder, a fantasy he projected when the reality of you, flawed, radiant, real, became too confronting. But the truth is not just about him. It's about you. Because here's the most painful revelation of all. You stayed because you forgot who you are. And forgetting yourself was easier than facing the truth. That you were always meant to leave. That the version of you who stays quiet, obedient, moldable, that version isn't you. That is the survival mask you wore to keep love from vanishing. But masks can't breathe. And what doesn't breathe eventually dies. Now is the moment when you must choose breath over bondage, truth over comfort, freedom over familiarity. You were not put on this earth to be compared. You are not a benchmark. You are not a performance. You are not a symbol of what he lacks or what he wishes he had. You are not here to compete with women you don't know, to live up to roles you didn't audition for, to carry shame for dreams that don't belong to you. You are here to become, and becoming demands sacrifice. You must be willing to set fire to the house he built from your insecurities, to burn the blueprint of the woman you were told to be, to mourn the approval you'll never get from someone who never knew how to give it. But in the ashes, something happens. You rise. Not the you he tolerated, not the you that played small, not the edited version of yourself that kept him calm. The real you, the one who remembers, the one who knows that her worth is not found in comparison, but in existence. The one who understands what Viktor Frankl meant when he said, "Those who have a why to live can bear with almost any how." Because now your why is no longer him. It is no longer survival. It is no longer proximity to love disguised as labor. Your why is truth. Your why is yourself. And this is the final paradox. You had to be broken by comparison to remember your wholeness. You had to be erased to realize you were never meant to be a copy. You had to be unloved the wrong way to finally recognize the shape of love done right. And so you begin again, not with revenge, not with bitterness, but with clarity. Because once you see the game, you can't play it anymore. Once you recognize the cage, you start looking for the key. Once you know what love is not, you start to make room for what it can be. And maybe that means walking away, not to punish him, but to finally stop punishing yourself. Because staying in a place where you are constantly measured kills something sacred, and leaving is resurrection. It's the moment you tell the universe, I will no longer earn my right to exist. You walk not into solitude, but into your own presence. Not into abandonment, but into self-respect. Not into loss, but into space. Space for real love to find you. Love that doesn't shrink you. Love that doesn't edit you. Love that doesn't require you to apologize for who you are. And most importantly, love that begins within. Because the truth you've been avoiding, the final one, is this. You were never waiting for him to change. You were waiting for yourself to wake up. And now you're awake. So if you're listening to this and your chest is tight, your stomach twisted, your eyes holding back tears, remember, that's not weakness. That's your soul recognizing itself. That's your power remembering the way home. So say it out loud, even if it trembles, even if your voice shakes, even if no one else hears it. Say, I am no longer available for comparison. Say, I am no longer becoming what I was never meant to be. Say, I am allowed to leave. I am allowed to begin again. Because in this world, there is no greater act of rebellion than choosing yourself. No louder scream than walking away in silence. No greater revolution than a woman who no longer waits to be chosen. Because she has finally chosen herself. And as the door closes behind you, don't look back. There is nothing there for you. No prize for endurance. No medal for suffering. Just the memory of a woman who once believed she had to earn what she was born with. Enoughness. Now walk, not away from him, but toward you. And when the silence comes, when the doubts creep in, when the loneliness circles like a storm, remember this. The emptiness you feel now is not a void. It's space. Space for truth. Space for joy. Space for a life that honors the woman you were always meant to become. And that life, it begins right now.